Let's wind the clock back a few years. I'm sitting in high school. It's the same plastic-formed chairs that I didn't need to learn to hate. It's the same teachers and classrooms and recycled slideshows that many of you now bear witness to. I'm so sorry. My deepest condolences. The point here is not that I never enjoyed school. However true that is, it's not the lesson, just the setting, so bear with me. Despite all of this, I'm not a troublemaker, and even as much as I hate enduring school, I have always tried, and tried my best. Of this, I'm very proud. That said, I'm a little bored, and, well, I've got questions about life and questions about myself, and I'm not finding the answers in my textbooks. So, I'm doing my best not to regret my time here, but I can't help but feel like it's a little bit wasted. And then on one particular day, it's my last day attending school before I decide to take a break, we'll say, I'm asked 5 times by faculty members in the span of 4 periods what school I'm going to next year. And that's not an unreasonable question, but for me, answering this question is particularly difficult, because I don't know if I'm going to be alive this time next month. See, I'm going on a trip on the asking of round 5, I just decided. I know that sounds rash, but I promise you it's not a whimsical decision. This trip has been in the planning for a little over a year now. I haven't exactly told anybody, though. In taking on this project, I'm starting to realize that I'm not really sure that I'm sane. Normal people probably don't think about doing the things that I think I should do, and I don't really hear about them acting on it. I'm embarrassed by these thoughts, and I'm a little bit afraid of what people might say. I probably should tell my family and friends, but I've decided that nobody is going to stop me. So, it's a small technicality, but anyways. I've been asked this for the 5th time in 4 periods, and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So I do what any reasonable 17-year-old would do. I packed up life's essentials, stuffed them in a borrowed backpack, zipped it up, slung it over my shoulder, and made for East Europe. Ukraine specifically. Why Ukraine? Well, that's where war was, naturally. And I rolled a die. Maybe I should back up a bit. Ukraine was and still is at war. They are under continuous invasion from Russia. Since 2014, this has been happening. The conflict has been coined with the term hybrid conflict, which means to say that war doesn't necessarily happen there on just battle lines, so much as socially, economically, and politically. So that made the conflict very interesting to me for discussion purposes. The people were also by and large Caucasian, so I figured I could blend halfway well. And at the height of some failing peace attempts, it seemed like as good a time as any for me to enter into the campaign. So now, here comes the obvious question: why? Why go out and do this thing? Well, it had very little to do with school. That was just the icing on the cake. There was so many reasons for doing this, and that was just one drop in the bucket, but I think I can surmise them all into largely one statement. So psychology majors, get your pens ready. As to the question, why leave? I wanted to see war. I wanted to see, taste, touch, feel, and know war. Most specifically, the things that it most often seems to draw up that I want to own for myself. In complete and brutal honesty, I want to know the anger and the anguish of loss, the struggle, the trauma, the strife, and the risk of war. That probably seems very strange and maybe even uncomfortable. Believe me, I get that because it makes me quite uncomfortable, but at the end of the day, it's the truth, and it's a part of me. And if we're ever to get to this bottom of this question as to why leave, we probably have to start with being truthful. Now, I debated myself with this question as to whether I should pursue leaving home and replacing it with conflict. I was born to a wealthy, middle-class Canadian family, raised with morals and taught to think for myself. Both of my parents are on the scene. I've never been abused. Being Canadian, my education and my health care have always been paid for. I've always had a job, and to top it off, I'm a white male. So I often ask myself, what gripe or complaint could I ever have that carries any legitimacy whatsoever? And that makes the statement that I am jealous of others' pain quite embarrassing, especially on this stage. But again, it's the truth, and it's a part of me. I could not help but feel how hopeless any attempt at understanding the world's grief might be when the only trial I had was that being thankful was hard when you cannot count the things you're supposed to be thankful for. But back to the story. I'd left. I'd boarded a series of planes and committed myself to a new future, and at least in this one, I would be witnessing the absence of the things that my North American life never took from me. Now, if you're expecting the description of some grandiose adventure, I'm sorry, I can't give that to you, because that would not be the truth. As all in all, this story is really a story of failure. I didn't see war. Nobody shot at me. I'm a little disappointed, in honesty, but I had wanted to see war, and ultimately failed in doing this. Yes, I did see tanks and tattered flags, men with Kalashnikovs and burned-out bunkers, shell-marked fields. I saw these things, but that was not then, in my mind, any form of war. If it wasn't the front lines, it wasn't worth my time. I was so close, though. Only a few horizons away were the front lines of a failed peace attempt, but I suppose not close enough to fulfill the definitions of my intentions. Instead, I ended up spending a lot of time learning about something on the other end of this spectrum of conflict. Ukraine owns the history of a very specific people group, the Mennonites. They are a stagnantly boring people sometimes, and a little bit laughable in some of their customs, but simultaneously they're admirable for their devotion and steadfastness in commitment. And so for over a month, I was immersed in the finer points of Mennonite architecture and history, and I was surrounded by the stories and example of the Mennonites. It's ironic to me that in trying to see a warring front, I instead was met with a people marked by pacifism and peaceful outreach. But this was the reality of my trip. Now, you might think that surrounded by all of this failure, I would be discouraged. And normally you'd be right in any other case, because I fear failure. I loathe it at every turn, and it keeps me up nights. And yet, even surrounded by all this failure, I seemed to feel okay. In front of me was a place on the other side of the Atlantic from my home, with no roof that I could predictably say was mine the next night, with no food that I could call my own. Behind me was a trail of broken relationships and hurts that I had left behind me. There wasn't much comfort in any of it, just the kinds of things that make you feel sick and wish were a dream. But I felt all right. Something wasn't adding up, and this I always struggled to explain. It's the embodiment of the idea that home is where your heart is. Even though I had failed to see conflict, I had succeeded in seeing something else. In leaving my regular place at home, I was able to gain an objective look at who I thought that I should really be. And I was able to gain a peace of mind over my situation. Now, I started this talk by showing you my education, because that time represents to me a version of me that I'd become very used to negative effect. I wasn't comfortable with my own identity. Sure, I had beliefs and defining characteristics that were a part of me, but they didn't mean anything to me because I hadn't tested them. So in leaving, I sought to change this. And I learned a lot of things. I learned where I would go and where I wouldn't go, how far I would push myself, and how intense the pursuit of a goal can be. Mostly, though, I learned the importance of identity. A friend asked me not too long ago, "Do you measure yourself in terms of pre-trip and post-trip?" I said then that no, I didn't, but I think I might now. I had wanted to go to the place where men and women meet their measure and see for myself in honesty where I stood. I was asking the question, who is Josh Boyd in the face of an extreme, and then actively pursuing an answer, and I got one. I searched for much of my life to find war, and finally failed. I found a peace instead, and maybe it wasn't such a bad deal. I was free to be myself, and freedom is great because of its consequences and repercussions. I embrace them gladly. I do not apologize for my actions, and I do not regret them. Now, I won't tell you that I've learned how to wake up and smile every day, and I won't tell you that adventure is the key to your success. I won't tell you that I think that happiness or a happy life is the best life to lead, and I don't think that optimism is the best way to carry yourself in every situation. That said, all I know is to say that identity doesn't just happen, it must be pursued. A fair warning, this is not an invitation to experiment as recklessly as I have. Just because you wish something to be does not make it good to try for it, a lesson I've since learned. But you are the only person that you can truly understand. So study yourself. In studying myself showed me to define who I was and then work to realize that that person could be real. Moreover, to be comfortable to act as that person. Now, we are all young. You and I are much the same, and we have very far to grow. I don't know about you, but I want to be in the world of the finished and practiced adult, that life where you have achieved something and mastered something, but it's still very far away. Those are full people, and I think a fundamental part in becoming a full person is understanding who you really are. I know that's not a new revelation. Most of you probably already do this on a regular basis, but for myself and for a few of us, I'm willing to bet that, like me, you either never learned or simply forgot that you can define your own story. For me, I was living a lying life, learning to think that the things I was trying for things that I didn't really care for, and learning to think that it was all important, when in reality, the most important thing to do was to learn to be comfortable as a product of my own actions. But you and I have not yet been afforded the opportunity to grow old. There's a lot of knowledge that we haven't gained yet, and a lot of decisions we're supposed to make based off of this. If you can't understand how you see the world, then you'll never know how to try and see the world. As our generation grows and begins to define and create, destroy, or build a new world around us in our industries and our homes, we are, all of us, going to have an understanding of who we are. Otherwise, faith can never be made your foundation. Occupation will only meet you with crisis. And empathy cannot be met with understanding. Ultimately, you cannot be happy in your own actions or confident in them. If there ever was a more fleeting or abstract thought worth pursuing, is it not that one? To understand yourself? Because if you can't comprehend the lenses that you see everything through, then why try to understand anything? Thank you.